much.
I'm just glad we could talk. Oh, hello.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to A Mighty Blaze. I'm Jenna Blum. I'm one of the co-founders of The Blaze. And today you caught me talking to one of my dearest friends in the whole world, Pam Jenoff, who I love so, so much. And I'm so delighted to welcome her to The Blaze to talk about her brand new book, which I also adore, The Woman with the Blue Star. I can never hold them up right, but I'm holding them up with love. So we are just sort of catching up and having like a little love fest behind the scenes. I'm going to read Pam's bio to you in a minute in case you have been living under a rock somewhere and don't know who she is. But first, I just want to welcome you all to The Blaze. If you are a returning watcher, welcome back. Thank you for continuing to watch our interviews. If you are new to The Blaze, we are a team of 35 creative volunteers who are dedicated to helping writers who are publishing in the age of COVID and beyond connect with their readers. So if you like what you see here, please give us a follow on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on Instagram. We are ubiquitous. Please consider signing up for our website, which is www.amightyblaze.com, because we have a newsletter and you will never have literary FOMO ever again. You'll be kept in the know with all of our upcoming interviews and who is pubbing every single week. This week, as many of you know, is a huge week for publishing. It is like a monster truck pub week, which I've been saying to the Blazers all week, and they're like, stop using that voice. I'm like, but it's monster truck. But the biggest monster truck of all is my friend Pam and her new book, Woman with the Blue Star. Pam, welcome to the Blaze.
I'm so excited to be here. I just can't believe what you've done. It's incredible. I remember when you and Caroline Levitt were just starting out, we have this idea and we're going to do it. And to see what you have grown it into is just incredible. I was here once visiting, I think, with Francesca Saratella last year, but I'm so excited. I've been waiting for this day forever.
Yes, you were. And that was an amazing interview. It was like brand new. I remember the Blaze at that point, and I was like in the green room producing and making love eyes at you. Hi, Tori, we see you. And Tori said the Blaze newsletter is awesome, which it is. And I didn't even pay her to say that. Tori is another one of our authors who is on for her debut novel. She has a second novel coming out this year. So we're going to drag her back into the spotlight. All right. So Pam, I have so many questions about the book and just about life, and just so happy to see you. But first I'm going to read your bio. So ready for you?
Right.
Buckle up. God, my God. They're always crooked. Why? Okay. So Pam is the New York Times bestselling author of The Woman with the Blue Star. I held it up on the right side that time. I'm so excited. The Lost Girls of Paris, which was a Mondo bestseller. The Orphan's Tale, The Commandant's Girl, The Diplomat's Wife, The Ambassador's Daughter, Last Summer at Chelsea Beach, The Winter Guest, The Things We Cherish, Almost Home, and A Hidden Affair. And you've written a lot of really wonderful novels when the person introducing you has to sound like an auctioneer just to fit them all into the bio. She also authored a short story in the anthology Grand Central, original post-war stories of love and reunion with I was also in that, and that was how we got to be such dear friends. She lives outside Philly with her husband, 3 children, 2 of whom are twins, a dog and a cat, and a lizard and a bird, which I don't think I knew about until this moment that you had a lizard.
Well, the lizard has been around. The bird is new, and the puppy is sick right now. So I know you and Henry I know you feel it.
I feel it. What's wrong with Scoop?
She has a little tum-tum, but the problem is I can't send him to daycare, which writers sending their dogs to daycare, not good dogs like Henry, but other dogs, is really a thing. So
no, Henry needs to go to daycare badly, but he mostly just gets dog walked and gets to hang out on the Commonwealth Mall. So we're both dog mamas, and we both got our dogs at about the same time. Pam is a first-time dog owner, and she got this luscious golden retriever. Is he a retriever or a lab?
A little lab. He's closely related to Henry. They're
I love him.
Little siblings.
I love him so much. And if you weren't in Philly and I were in Boston, they would be playing every day, but we have to get them together this summer. So her dog's name is Scoop, and I am in love with Scoop, who looks so sweet and so good, and not like my insano boy who you can probably see out the window. He's hostage signaling to everybody. He's like, let me out. Lady is just talking on her weird computer again. Let me out. Anyway, so I can't wait for us to have like dog play date together. So I'm obviously getting off course here, but I wanted to let you guys know that Pam also worked for us. This is something you might not know if you haven't been fangirling on her for a long time. She also worked at the Pentagon and the State Department and was assigned to the U.S. consulate in Krakow, which is really important because it's at this point that Pam developed her expertise in, and also I think passionate interest in Polish-Jewish relations and the Holocaust, which is a theme that gets played over and over in your work. And you worked on the preservation of Auschwitz and the restitution of Jewish property in Poland. And Pam also teaches at Rutgers. P.S. Y'all teaches law. So I don't know how you do all these things. And one of my first questions for you is how? Like, how do you manage to write a best-selling book just about every year, right? We've talked about the pace of this, and teach at Rutgers, and raise twins and your son, and run households and pre-COVID travel everywhere to talk about your books. How do you get this all done?
I don't, so I don't think I get it all done, right? No one gets it all done most days. And I actually have slowed down on the books. I'm much more like a year and a half to 2 years as I've gotten older. I prefer that I know you're like, ugh, but I prefer that creatively. I prefer it commercially. Like on every level, I've just enjoyed doing it that way. I usually say I do too many things and none of them well. That feeling we all have, but I juggle and I triage exactly like everyone else. I have a husband who can juggle babies. My mom is a mile down the road and my house is disgusting. Like if you saw what's going on behind that screen back there, it's a whole other thing. So Anne Lamott said that before children, she couldn't write if there were dirty dishes in the sink. And after children, she could write if there was a corpse in the sink. And that's how I feel. So it's a mess, but I love it. I love it all.
I love that too. And I feel like this year has taught me about growing up in a way, because I didn't do this pre-COVID. I didn't do it pre-Blaze. Like we had talked in the backseat of many cars going to many events together about this pace of her life that Pam keeps, that I know so many authors with children keep as well, female authors especially. And I was like, I'm the person who, if I have a hangnail, I'm like, oh, I can't write today. Ouchie, it hurts to type. And then I'll like go shopping. I mean, this is all pre-COVID, obviously. And that's why I call Pam the General, because I come out with a book every 5 to 10 years and she comes out with a book every 1.5 years, which is slow for her. And I was like, what? So when we were all on tour together for Grand Central, just Pam and me and Christina McMorris and Sarah McCoy and Karen White and Erica, oh my God.
Roebuck and
thank you, my COVID brain. I'm sorry, Erica. Cheese, Allison Richmond, like all these people I love. I just had my second Pfizer shot, guys, so I'm really stupid today. But anyway, thank you for supplying that. So we were all on tour together, and we were on tour, and I'm like, oh, I'm on tour. I can't write because I'm touring, and I have to swan around, and I have to put on makeup, which takes several hours. And Pam and Karen White would get up every morning, run up and down the staircases of these buildings in New York for their workout. And then they would write before an event, which was amazing. So I started calling her the General because your writing process is...
Well, I'm an everyday writer, right? So I'm a 5 a.m. I want 5 a.m. And if it gets really dire, it could be 4 a.m., but I hate that. But I really am very serious about the early morning. And there's sometimes you have to, forgive yourself. It's pub week. The puppy's sick. I'm taking the kids camping today. Like there's sometimes it's a little messy, but I do get it done. But to your point about, and I want to say this because it really matters to me, about women and what we do and writing, the biggest lesson out of COVID for me, out of this year, has been not to apologize for working. When COVID hit last year and I had everybody home and a new puppy, I didn't work for like 6 months. And it was just a very strangling feeling. And then in September, when the kids hit virtual school, I put the dog in daycare, they went online, and I started working again. And it felt amazing. And I felt better physically and emotionally. And it made me realize that we spend so much time as women, we make excuses for our work. We treat our work like our free time and all of these things. And it was just so important to say it's okay to work.
That is such an amazing lesson. Thank you for sharing that. I feel validated in some ways. I think that, again, I had sort of gotten off track before, but I said I grew up this year because before the Blaze, I had the luxury of like writer life free time, and I was traveling and speaking and teaching and writing, but it was much more fluid time. And now that I have this amazing team to work with, if I don't show up for work, stuff doesn't get done, right? Like people depend on each other. So for the first time, so many people were talking about oh, I'm having such a boring pandemic and I'm going to take up knitting or, learn a language or whatever. And I was like, who are you freaking people? Because I'm working 16 hours a day in my underwear, like legit. Right. And I also had written my memoir during this time also about Woodrow, about my old dog, which is coming out in October. And I got up early every day to do that. So I got up an hour earlier to do that. And the whole time I was like, who am I? But I have noticed that although I love now like playing in the same ballpark as all my grown-up friends, families, like Blaze is now my family and I tend it that way. My own writing and my own book promotion gets triaged to the back. Right. So I'm like, oh, do you guys need me to Zoom with you on this? Fine, I'll do this later. And I've noticed that I keep pushing my own stuff to the back burner. Do you have advice for women about that? Women especially. Sorry, gentlemen, I don't mean to cut you off the herd here, but
yeah. Isn't it funny though? And I will tell you my little advice, but isn't it funny about the pandemic that there have been like two camps? There are people who someone said to me, are you bored? Right? Like there are the people who are bored. And then there are the people who can't breathe. Like there's no in between. And I've been in the can't breathe category this year, in terms of busyness, right? In terms of just feeling, so much more to do, so much more emotional care for others, for yourself. But even before that, I've always had to guard that writing time because when I started writing, when I got serious about it, I was a new attorney at a big city law firm with a lot of student loan debt. And so I always had to write those books from 5 to 7 in the morning, always. And so what this has taught me is that you must protect your writing time. So even now that things are established and I have a wonderful supportive village, nobody says, not my mom, not anyone in my world, not my kids, certainly, no one says, why don't you go take some writing time, right? That's just not the world we live in where we have to find the time for ourselves and protect it. So if I have any druthers in scheduling a meeting or a doctor's appointment, you bet I'm not going to do it in the morning. Right. That's like sacrosanct, don't even call me because you have to guard that little block of your best time, I think.
I love that advice. Thank you. Yeah, my agent told me this, and some of you have heard me talk about my fabulous French agent before, but I remember her saying to me a few years ago, like, Jenna, you have to calendarize. I was like, that is not even an actual verb. What does that mean? And she's like, you have to put the writing time on it. She's, from Paris. She's this beautiful, like sort of Judith Kronsos. You have to put the writing time on your calendar and treat it like anything else. You have to show up for yourself. You are a writer. That is what you do. And I try to mark that time, and the getting up earlier when I had first founded The Blaze was really helpful because it was this time where, I was kind of bubbled in. But then I got a puppy and he needed to go out right away. So I was like, now he's a little older, so I can maybe get back to it. Hi, Ellen. It's so nice to see you. Ellen from Rochester, Florida. Hi. We have so many friends here today. I know. I can see you all in the chat. Okay, so let's talk about The Woman with the Blue Star a little bit. Love this book. Love it so much. I love all of Pam's books. I have them all. They're all on my shelves. But this one has a special, like, je ne sais quoi, since I was talking about my agent. It has like a sort of a condensed quality to it, I think, because of the circumstances that the two heroines are in. And so for those who haven't read the book yet, who haven't had the privilege of reading it within the last 3 days since it came out, can you describe for us your thumbnail of what Woman with the Blue Star is about?
Sure. So this book, it was actually inspired by a true story. And I don't write true stories. I write fiction. But the true story that inspired it was about a group of Jewish people who survived the Holocaust by hiding in a sewer. And I don't mean like hiding like they escaped through the sewer. I mean hiding like they stayed in the sewer and lived there for more than a year as the war raged on overhead. And when I found this idea, I was just captivated when I read this story. And I was captivated too by an anecdote from among those people of a young girl who was in the sewer. And one day she looked up through the sewer grate and she saw a girl her own age buying flowers. And she was so struck by this disparity between her life and the girl's life. And her mother said to her, someday there will be flowers for you, is this kind of promise. And so I found myself wondering what would happen if the girl in the sewer and the girl on the street had actually met? What if their eyes had locked and they had met and made a connection? And what would that friendship mean for their lives? So in The Woman with the Blue Star, Sadie, who was in the sewer, and Ella on the street. They meet and they become very close in ways that'll just change both of their lives forever.
Where did you come across this anecdote? I was so curious if you can share that.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember because I mean these days, look, it's not always that the idea finds you. Sometimes you go looking for the idea. So I'm typically online. I'm in the archives at Yad Vashem or the Holocaust Museum or various different places where there's a lot of stories recorded. So I am not sure where I found the exact original story. However, I was very fortunate in that there's some really good nonfiction books that have been written that describe this particular event. And there's one in particular called In the Sewers of Lviv by, I think it's Robert Marshall. I don't want to get that wrong. And his book had all of the detail. Hi, Sue. Thank you for being here. Had all of the detail of, what the sewer looked like and how they survived and what the perils were. And that was what I really, really needed to know to get started.
So the idea of people living in a sewer was so horrifying and fascinating to me in the same way that a lot of my phobias are horrifying and fascinating, like rats or snakes. Like my mom used to be terrified of snakes, and so she would go out of her way to torture herself by watching like Animal Planet specials about snakes, but like from the other room with her hands over her eyes. And I felt kind of the same way about the idea of living in a sewer, because it's not necessarily that I'm a germaphobe, thank God, or I would never have survived the last year and a half, but I am like a dirtophobe. Like I'm a poopophobe. Like can't do poop. Like I have no.
What do you do? What do you do with your poor Henry?
That's different, right? It's like your kid's poop is different. It's like, it's Henry. It's just food repurposed. But, just the idea of like, oh God, the sewer. How did you do your research for this to sort of put yourself in the mindset of living in a place that is so fulsome? I was captivated by that.
Well, there was a couple wonderful books that really described what it was like. So you first have to imagine that some parts of sewer are as big as a kind of a raging river, and some are so small you could barely fit through. I had to think about things like, did they have light? Did they have, could they cook? How would they get water? What were the perils? Because it wasn't just detection. It was drowning. It was, it was starvation and all of those things. And there were rats. I'm going to be honest.
I know there were rats. I was like, rats. Why did it have to be rats? Right. But of course
there were rats. So I learned all of this, and I don't know if you know this story, but I actually, let me back up. The real story for these people was set in Lviv, Poland, which is very close to the Ukrainian border. Sometimes it's been in Poland and sometimes it's been in the Ukraine. I moved my story to Krakow. It's a city much closer to my heart. It's a city that is very accessible to readers. And I like taking that step away from the real story because I don't feel that theirs is kind of mine to tell. So I moved the book to Krakow and I said, I need to go to Krakow. It's been 17 years. I used to live in Krakow. I lived there for several years, but I hadn't been back in almost 20 years. I'm going to Krakow. This was my plan for research. And I booked myself a really nice trip departing on March 11th, 2020. And so as COVID starts bubbling up, people are saying, do you think you should go? I said, I'm going to wear a mask because we didn't even know about masks back then. I'm going to wear a mask. I'm going to Poland. My flight was canceled. And the next day I had an emergency appendectomy. So thank goodness my flight was canceled, or I would have been in the air, but I never got to go in person for this book. And it's one of my very deep regrets. Now I'm lucky in that I still know a lot of people in Poland and in the consulate. And these were people who were helping me plan the trip. And when I couldn't go, they pivoted because we all pivoted last year, and they helped me find the resources. So I was able to talk to an actual sewer utilities person in Krakow, and make sure, because I wanted to make sure what I planned in Krakow was as viable as it had been in Lviv. I wanted to be accurate. I had a Krakow expert. I had a language expert, not to say there won't be mistakes that are all mine, but I had a lot of people that I could draw on remotely for this one.
When you talked to the sewer expert, were you able to do this on Zoom or did you do it on the phone? And did you have to do it in Polish, or tell me all the things?
It was email, and it was in English. I do speak Polish, but it happened to be in English. And he sent me a lot of sort of maps and diagrams, because you have to realize, right as we were shutting down, they were shutting down. And so there was like a museum for the city that I would have been able to go to, but they hit COVID hard after Italy, right? They went down sooner than we did. So I think it was hard for them as well. And at that point, we weren't all that well versed in Zoom 15 months ago, or 14 months ago, right? We were just getting started. Oh, I have a friend saying hello from Poland. I saw Jenna.
Sorry, I'll put it back up. Sorry. And I know my producers are like,
thank you for joining us.
That is, I when you said, we didn't know about Zoom or should you fly, you just brought back to me all of the uncertainty of those early days where we knew something bad was coming, but we weren't sure, like, could you thread the needle or would it really be that bad? Could you actually, just run the gauntlet just to do the thing that you needed to do before the doors all closed? And I'm glad you weren't in the air having an emergency appendectomy, but I hope you can return to Poland with the book when things open up. Do you have plans to do that?
Well, I haven't made any travel plans yet. Frankly, I'm waiting till my kids can be vaccinated. So we're not looking to go anywhere, but I certainly think I owe myself a trip to Poland, and I may not get to go alone this time. The kids are, the whole family may come with me, but in all seriousness, a lot of the survivors who I was so close to in that part of the world, some have passed on and some are getting up there in years. And it's really a goal of mine to get back to Krakow and see people.
Mm-hmm. I can totally understand that. I used to interview Holocaust survivors.
Hi, Amelia.
I love, oh my gosh, during a break from third grade. That's awesome. Thank you for joining us. Oh my gosh, thank you for joining us. So I interviewed survivors, so we have this theme in common and this interest in common in keeping this history alive, which I also have questions about. But I wanted to sort of acclimate readers even more to The Woman with the Blue Star. You have two heroines. You have Sadie, who lives with her family in the sewer, we'll just leave it at that because I don't want any spoilers. And Ella, who is above ground, whom Sadie glimpses through the grate, and the two of them become friends. Can you talk a little bit about how you formed the two characters? And did you feel closer to one than the other?
It's interesting. So I don't know if we've talked about this before, Jenna, like plotter versus pantser. So the plotters are our dear friends who write outlines and make things look nice. And I'm a pantser, which stands for seat of the pants. So I get an idea and I go, blah, and I throw all of these words onto a page for many months. And the reason I mention this is because I only get to know my characters through that process. So someone once said that being a plotter, you put up scaffolding. Being a pantser is like an archaeological dig. And so, I hold up this object and I'm like brushing it off and trying to see what it is. So I meet my characters in a more organic way. So I knew I was going to have this woman in the sewer. My character is considerably older than the girl who actually looked through the grate. So I have Sadie in my book. And I knew that I wanted her to see someone on the street about her own age. Now, the interesting thing is, we haven't really touched on this, but the first draft I wrote of this book was a total stinker, right? Like it got scrapped and I had to throw away 90% of this book and start over. It was horrific.
Why? What made it so stinky besides the sewer part?
I don't know. I wrote a draft and I turned it in, and Jenna, my editor is Erica, who you've worked with me, who's like the absolute best human and best editor.
So great. She better be watching. Hi, Erica. I mean, just so I can say that, like, Erica,
right.
Love you. We talk about you a lot behind the scenes, but
all good.
All totally good. Yep.
So when I turned this book in, and it is my 11th book, and Erica was like, no. And that was really hard. It was really hard. And in fact, so picture this. I'm driving back from some law workshop or something, and I had to meet with Erica by phone before COVID to talk about what's wrong with this book. I had nowhere to go. I pulled into like a Bob Evans on the highway. The only time I've ever been to a Bob Evans. And I pulled in, I get out, I get out my notebook, I get out my phone, and I just start writing down everything she tells me that's wrong with the book. And as we're doing this, just realizing it's a total rewrite. It's a total rewrite that has to be done in 5 months. So I got my super general suit on. But the reason I say this is when I wrote the first draft, it was all from Sadie's point of view, all from the point of view of the girl in the sewer. And I had to, one of Erica's really wonderful suggestions was like, what about Ella, the girl on the street? And I was like, oh. And so the book became a two point of view story in that revision. So I got to know Ella much better at that point.
And I imagine it was much less claustrophobic as well. One of my dreads as an author is to have a character in the same setting all the time. And then how do you keep that fresh for the reader, right? So allowing us to get above ground gives us that extra dimension of, you would think it would be a relief, but it's actually an extra dimension of terror because Ella is helping Sadie and her family and the people underground stay alive, right? So was she also based on a real person, or was she somebody you invented out of whole cloth?
Invented out of whole cloth. So one of the things I'm most interested in from the war is individualized human responses. I don't want to paint with the broad brushes, as I was sometimes taught history as a child. And so I very much like to look at a situation, war, catastrophe, peril, and figure out what makes a particular person respond in the way that they do, and look at the range of ways that people responded. So creating Ella, a young woman who lives with relative ease in the war. She's got a dire family situation, but she's not persecuted by the Germans. And when she looks through the sewer grate and she sees those eyes looking up at her, what makes it so that she can't look away? And so that's really where it comes from, is who is this woman who chooses to do what she does?
Mm-hmm. Great. Yes. And Ella, I was thinking about Cinderella a little bit when I was reading her, because she does have this sort of awful family situation that I personally would have found delicious to write. She has like a wicked stepmother in a way who I was just like, oh my God, this woman is so rotten.
I never thought of that. I love it.
Yes, you did. You intended all of that symbolism. That was so smart of you to do that. I love to write the rotten characters, I think, the best, because I'm never quite as rotten in real life as I want to be sometimes.
You're never rotten at all. You're never rotten.
Well, I funnel it all into these awful, awful characters who are just total jerks, right? And I thought I always have so much fun writing them, and I hoped you had fun writing the person in that book. But that's so right what you said about writing the individuated response. I think that when you're looking at a monolith like World War II, and we know there are a lot of World War II novels that continue to come out, and I'm so glad, because people should not forget that so important chapter in our history, is pivotal chapter. But it's such a monolith, right? He's like, the war, where do you even start with that? And a war is made up only of people. So why is it that some people's responses are humane and other people's responses are sometimes understandably shut down, and other people's responses are really evil, like really bad? Who chooses what and why? Do you have a sort of an answer for that? Like, do you have any sort of formula you could tell people, like, this is what predicates people toward the humane response?
I don't have it. I don't have the answers, which is probably why I keep writing about this. But I'm very interested in the gray areas. So in my books, I want my villains to be human. I want my heroes to be flawed. I want my bystanders to be everywhere in between. And that's very important to me. One of the things when you think about that broad brushstroke, and I realize this more and more today in our world, I hate the pronoun they. Right. And I realize we use all sorts of different pronouns for gender reasons. I don't mean it in that way. I hate a collective they when we're talking about history. Right. They did something. And I always want to stop and ask, who are they? Right. Who are they when we talk about it? Because we really need to break it down to the individuals to be able to understand. And so that's why I think historical fiction is actually not just entertaining, but incredibly useful, because one, it requires the reader to put herself or himself in the shoes of the protagonist and say, what would I have done in these circumstances? And then it also requires us to identify and empathize with people who are very different from ourselves. And I think when you think about current events, even, that will help to dissipate the collective they.
That's so true. And I see this all the time on social media, people putting other people in groups, and it's not just one side or the other, right? The liberals, the conservatives, the this, the that. And I actually do, I hope gently, but I always take umbrage with that and say, I think we should be very careful about saying the anything. And if there's anything that Holocaust studies has taught me, it's that. To say, if you put people into a group, no matter how well-intentioned you are, you're removing the individuality from people. And that's what gets us into trouble. So even if people are like, oh, but I'm saying something really good about this group, like they're smart or they're whatever, I'm like, nope. and historical fiction, I think, is about that intersectionality of personality and circumstance. You have to look at each character and how they interlock with whatever their life is giving them at the moment. So
Yeah.
It's something that you do beautifully in all of your books, which is why I always love to read them. So you continue to return to this oeuvre, I guess I would say, or this topic, this subject, maybe to try and continue to unlock that intersectionality between person and circumstance. One of the things that fascinates me as somebody who's written World War II work, but doesn't continue to go back to it every time just because I can't keep it fresh. How do you keep it fresh for yourself and not feel like, oh, I wrote this in a different character? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, it's because the era is not a monolith, and there's so many different countries and years and people and stories. And so what I'm always looking for, and I don't, if there's a point at which I can't do it, I can't find that story, and I'll tell you what I'm looking for in a second, then I would happily move on. But what I'm looking for is a few things. I'm looking for the aha moment. So when I'm researching, I want the idea that makes me gasp. Because I think if it makes me go, then I'm hopeful, after 25 years of doing this, if I still find the gasp, then I'm hopeful it will make the reader do the same thing. But it can't be just an aha. It has to be something interesting and new. And it has to be something that I can do in a respectful, almost reverential way. I don't know if that's a word, but I want to have that level of respect for the people and the era. So that's what I'm really looking for. And as long as I still find those stories that are both new and fresh and educational and can be done respectfully, I will keep doing it.
Well, thank goodness for that. When are there not aha moments in this period of history, right? When I was detaching from my first book, which was a really long process, it was a World War II novel as well. And there were a lot of shrapnel stories that I had, like things that were working themselves out from under my skin. But all of the things that I was continuing to read because I couldn't get out of the time period easily were aha moments. Like I would think, oh, what if I wrote a story about the barber at Auschwitz who was cutting everybody's hair who survived the war, and how do you cut hair after the war? Just there were so many things that kept landing on me. And after an event once with the Jewish Book Council, I said, maybe those are the souls of people who like flew up the chimney and came down as sparks and landed on me somehow. Do you feel that you're continuing to sort of pay a debt as a Jewish American writer? I mean, I feel this very strongly, to the people who didn't make it. Do you feel that that's part of what you're doing with your work?
So to the people who didn't make it, to the people who did make it, I consider my books love songs to the people who lived through that era. And so, when I went to Poland, I was in my early 20s and I was alone before cell phones, before the internet in that part of the world. And I gravitated toward the synagogue, toward the shul, and toward the Jewish community, which was mostly comprised of survivors at that time. And I was there every Shabbat for 2 years. And so they became like family to me, and they shared their stories in a way they wouldn't have done if I was just like whizzing through for a quick visit. We became really, really close. And so I don't tell their stories of themselves, of their families, of incredible stories that stay with me. I don't write their stories, but I would consider, if I do the books well, it to be a tribute to them and to people they lost, who they told me about.
Mm-hmm. Is there one particular survivor? Because I know neither of us repurpose survivor stories in our work, right? I think that's true. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't. Not directly. I'm inspired by, but I don't write their stories.
Same here. I feel like this is hallowed ground. It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the survivor. But there are things that I heard in my interviews that I would sort of turn inside out like a pocket in fiction and say this is maybe something that could have happened, like inspired by actual events, right? Yeah. But is there a survivor whose story you particularly remember, who you wish you could see again?
Yes. So there's a few, but specifically the man who was the cantor at the synagogue when I lived in Krakow in 1996 to 1998, Cantor Stein. He was about 80 years old at that time, and his son was 10. And he had a son and a wife. And his story was that he had lived further east, I believe in Ukraine. And he came to Krakow after the war looking for his wife and child because Krakow is very close to Auschwitz. So he came looking for his wife and child and he never found them, but he settled in Krakow and he had this second family and this kind of second chance at life. And I really adored him. And he passed away in around 2013 at the age of 100. As did my other most beloved person, one of them from the era, Leopold Kozlovsky, who was the last klezmer in that part of the world. And Leopold not only is an actual survivor, but he was in Schindler's List when Spielberg went and filmed in Krakow. He was one of the two bankers who finances the plant for Schindler. And so he was very proud of that story. And he also died about 2 years ago-ish at the age of 100. So.
Wow, God bless that they lived that long. And I hope they heartily enjoyed their lives. I think we've talked about this before, but I always think that Holocaust survivors should be given special dispensation to never die if they don't want to, and just to live forever and enjoy forever. But I'm glad that they lived that long. Can we, let's pivot a little bit and talk about like your own path to publication, which is long and amazing. And you've been writing for how many years now, even though you're a Rutgers professor?
Well, depending on what you mean by writing, right? So I was the little kid who always wanted to be a novelist. Like my 5th grade yearbook said, next Judy Blume. So I was always scribbling. It was never poems. It was always going to be books. And I had plenty of time. I lived abroad. I was in school. We all have time, really, if we want it. But I could never get started on my writing. And so the turning point for me was actually 9/11. I graduated from law school in Philadelphia. And I started working at a large law firm on September 4th, 2001 was my first day at the firm. It was a Tuesday, the Tuesday after Labor Day. And the very next Tuesday, 1 week later, was 9/11. You know, I was sitting at the firm when the towers fell. And I had a life epiphany, which I call, it's a little bit flipped for such a day, but I call it, Dear God, I don't want to die at the law firm. And what it meant was that I loved being an attorney. I teach lawyers. I teach law school. I love the profession, but I had this other dream, a really deep dream of being a novelist. And if I had been a 9/11 victim, I never would have realized that dream. I didn't have forever. So that's when I got serious. I took a night course. It was called Write Your Novel This Year. And I started working on the first book that would become Commandant's Girl. So that's when I got serious. But lest you think it was a hop and a skip and a jump from there to your local independent bookstore, it was 5 years. It was 39 publisher rejections until that first book was actually accepted.
Wow. How did you manage to persevere through the 5 years and the 39 rejections? Writers take heart. It takes a long time. If you have 40, I had 43 rejections on my first book. How did you get through this?
Well, I had an agent at that time who really stuck by me. And he said, well, when they all got first rejected, he said, just go write another book. We'll sell that one. We'll bootstrap this one to it, as if it was that easy. So I was diligently working on a second book. And on April 8th, 2005, it was a Friday afternoon, my phone at the law firm rang. And I saw my agent pop up on the caller ID. And I picked up the phone. No one ever called you. Even back then, it should have been email. So I picked up the phone. I said, are you calling to fire me? Because I hadn't made this poor guy a dime. And he said, no. And I said, well, are you calling to yell at me for not finishing another book? And he said, no, I'm calling to tell you we sold the first book. And it turned out that hi, Mindy Ehrlich, I love you.
Mindy.
One publisher, I used to call him the last known publisher on earth, but that's not true. It's my current publisher. But one publisher who still had the book, and I didn't know the editor was still reading 11 months later, made a tiny little offer for Commandant's Girl, and off we went. And now things are good, and lots of people in publishing act like they knew it all along, but I still have those hard copy rejection letters from all of those editors.
Where do you have them? Do you have them like in a drawer?
Some random, like I'd say a file cabinet, but it's more like a cardboard box with a few files. Yeah, I do. I kept, and I throw out everything, but I did keep those letters.
That's amazing. I have my 43 agent rejection letters somewhere in my attic, like in a cardboard box somewhere. I had them on my wall while I was querying. And then when I got my fabulous agent who I'd been with for almost 20 years now, I had the great joy of like thinking, bah, and taking them down, you know. And then when the book finally got published, I could write my sort of FU letter to the other people.
I didn't write the FU letter. Maybe
I only did in my head, but
good.
Okay. So I want you guys to hear this. I do have friends and people I work with in my novel workshop who are querying right now or who are waiting for their books to be read. One of my friends has waited 6 weeks for her book to be read, 11 months, and it can still happen, right? This is not an instant gratification profession. And now Pam is like top of the Times list with almost every book that comes out. I have
knocking wood.
This will be the same. It will be the same. I wanted to ask you what it was like to get that first notification that you were on the Times list also, because that's such a big thing.
So this is a really funny story. So I've written 11 books, but I did not hit the New York Times. I used to say I could not hit a bestseller list with a baseball bat. I did not hit the New York Times until book 9, which was The Orphan's Tale. So that was in 2017. And the day it hit, March 1st of 17, was exactly 10 years to the day from when Commandant's Girl came out. So it was 10 years to hit the list. And ironically, I was at karate with my kids, and I used to do the karate with them because I have a black belt. So I'm like half in my uniform. And I don't know if I really thought about like the Wednesday night thing where you hear who's on the New York Times, but I saw that I had missed a call from a 212 from New York number. So like, oh, I'll just call this back. And it was the publishing team to tell me. And they were like, are you going to do something big to celebrate? I was like, I'm at karate with the kids. I guess we'll add an extra topping on the pizza. Like it's not really a celebratory Wednesday night, but it was an amazing moment to finally have that happen.
Yeah, sort of validating, right? And for those of you who don't know, this is when you find out Wednesday before the Sunday that your book is actually on the list.
Right.
Yeah. I remember this. Yes. I had this like as a PDF that somebody sent me from the publisher attached to an email. And I called my agent. I was like, who is playing this trick on me? Somebody mocked up a New York Times list with my name on it. It just felt so weird. And my agent, who has that beautiful French accent, said to me at that time, "It is no joke." She had a whole new voice. "It is no joke. Your book is on the bestseller list 2 years after it has come out in paperback."
It's incredible.
How did you do this? People are calling you the biscuit. So I just never, but I still feel like, oh my gosh, it's such a standard that I'm hoping to hit with every book. And I remember when Orphan's Tale hit the Times list for you that you were like, okay, now I know I'm not a one-hit wonder. This is legit happening. Do you still wake up in your life sometimes and think, how did this even happen? Like, I know how it happened, but is it really happening?
It's just surreal because it's very detached from ordinary life. So it's incredible, but on a day-to-day basis, it doesn't change anything. And I don't want it to change anything. So, Wednesday night would happen. And then Thursday morning, I would be driving to work, eating the same peanut butter sandwich in the car, in the very, making my normal stop. So it's wonderful. And you know what? I don't keep I don't keep the papers. I don't keep the list. I don't keep the ads. I look at them and I appreciate them, and then I let them go, because if I do that, if I hang on to it, like, it's going to mess with me. I think in the whole process, I think it's going to take the joy out of it. Even this week, like, it's stressful, it's hard. And there's that part of the process, like talking to you is a joy, but that part of the process is not joyous to me, if that makes any sense. Like, I'm grateful. I'm so happy and so grateful that happened, but I'm a stressor. So I'm a little bit like, ooh,
It's so interesting. We will debrief when we can get together in person about the fact that you keep your rejection letters, but not your New York Times list. So I'm just going to put that.
Going on here.
Oh yeah, I've been going to therapy for like 21 years.
You've always been able to do that to me. Like the first time I met you and Sarah McCoy, we were at the Oyster Bar or something, and you guys I used that term from True Blood. You glamored me. Right? You just did that. I felt compelled, like I looked into your eyes and I felt compelled to tell you my whole life story.
I do that to you all the time. I can't wait to do that again post-pandemic. Get you with wine and be like, okay, let's sit down and talk. Okay, so I could ask you all my personal questions and do many faux psychology things for a while, but we have audience questions. How important is language to you? How is language important to you? Sorry, I transpose that. Some Holocaust novels today fail that test. Interesting question.
So do you mean in terms, I'm wondering if that means in terms of foreign language, because we use those phrases, and we're using language. First of all, you need language that's authentic to the period, but then quite often we're writing in English and our characters are speaking in translation, right? So it's sometimes hard to hit that. And then with respect to Jenna, with Polish language, for example, I spoke Polish, really fluently, but I'm certainly not competent today. And so my first few books have a few language mistakes that I really wish I could go back in time and fix. But for The Woman with the Blue Star, we actually retained a Polish language expert. And I had a couple experts looking at it, both the language person and the Krakow person, right? I had a historical expert, a language person, and they're looking at it. And sometimes even between them, we could disagree. It's really challenging.
Mm-hmm. And do you think, there are more questions, so I'm not going to ask follow-up. Leslie wants to know, do you ever dream about your characters? What a great question. Do they get into your core and become real people for you?
I'm not sure if I've dreamt about them, but I do want to tell an anecdote. When I finished The Commandant's Girl, which was my first book, I knew I was on the hook to write another historical fiction because I was under contract. And one day, as I was in my bathroom brushing my teeth, a character popped up from Commandant's Girl, not the main character, but another character. And she literally popped up in my bathroom and was like, it's my turn. And I thought, I didn't even know you were still alive. And so she was, and it became a sequel, which I had never planned. So I'm not someone who regularly interacts with my characters. Like, I'm not super artsy in that way. But that was one time when a character very clearly told me what I was going to write.
Oh my God, I love it. So yes, we have time for this one last question from Anissa. Yay! Who is the hardest character to write? And I'm assuming that you mean Woman with a Blue Star, Anissa, right? Not the other books. Let's start with this book. Who's the hardest character from Woman with the Blue Star?
Ooh, tough question. I think this is a really good one. So I can't say too much without giving it away. I know, Anissa, I think you've read it. Sadie's mother is in the sewer with her, and Sadie's mother is pregnant, if you can imagine. And that is a snippet that I borrowed from real life. There was a pregnant woman in the sewer. And so the things she goes through and the choices she makes were extremely difficult to grapple with. And that's all I'm going to say without ruining the book.
Yeah, that was, I could not imagine being pregnant in a sewer. You guys, like, if this doesn't make you want to read the book, what does? I mean, you have to read this book. It's so good. I think there's one more question my producers are saying, right? So, Anissa, you don't get the last question after all. I'm sorry. And I think they're looking for it. I'm going to grab this question. Would you consider writing something that is not historical fiction, and what would it be?
So I have, of my 11 books, 2 are modern. Almost Home and A Hidden Affair are more suspenseful. And The Things We Cherished was sort of half historical, half modern. So I have written those. And I certainly have that drawer full of ideas that will not fly in 1940, about like social media and stuff and women's novels. I would love to write. But my plate is so full right now. And there's a real appetite with my readership. And there's these stories to be told. So, maybe someday, I keep joking that I'm going to write like a big soppy romance under a pen name. I'm going with like PJ Silcox, because that's my husband's last name.
Oh my God, that's great.
Right? So that's my next move. But for right now, super busy.
Now we know that it's you. If we ever see PJ Silcox, we'll be like, oh yeah, we know it, Pam. By the way, at my Grub Street Novel Workshop, we have been threatening for a long time to do something called Summer Fling, where we cheat on our own genre and just write terrible, terrible romances. And if you feel like you have to take a shower after you write a scene because it's so bad, you're doing it right. So, and that's a 6-week thing that we're going to commit to. So you can come and hang out with us and write this horrible.
I've never been to Grub Street, and I'm desperate to come to Muse. So let's make this happen.
We'll totally make it happen. Pam, my love, we have to let you go. I could talk to you for so many more weeks, let alone hours, but we have another interview coming down the track. So, I know, but thank you so much for joining us today. Do you have a copy of Woman with the Blue Star that you can hold up?
I do. I'm usually not that which side? This side? No, this side.
Either side looks beautiful on you. It is so good. Guys, if you haven't bought Pam's Woman with the Blue Star yet, please join it. There's a link in the chat that goes to her favorite bookshop, which is Inkwell, New Jersey. Is it Inkwell or
Inkwood?
Inkwood.
And I can literally go there and personalize whatever you want in the book.
Yeah, I saw you sending all those books on Social Girl. So yes, go and order Pam's book right now. And it actually is a good Mother's Day gift, I have to say,
Mother
because
and
it's all
daughter.
about women and the choices that mothers make, and mothers and daughters. And your mom is going to love a Pam Jenoff book. Who would not? So buy it. 5 copies at least for every mom you know, and every woman you know, and every reader you know. Pam, love you so
I love
much.
you too. Mwah. Thank you
Love
for
the
having
talk.
me.
Of course, anytime.
Bye.